All right, welcome back everybody to Channel 9 Live here at Build. I'm excited again. My name is Tim Hewer. I have a great panel of folks here with me. We've got Paul, Andrew, and Ballin here joining us. Gentlemen, why don't you quickly introduce who you are, what you do, and your kind of focus area on the tools team.
All right. Hey, Tim, I'm Paul Yuknovich. I'm one of the lead PMs on the team. My team works on Visual Studio Azure and also Azure Diagnostics.
Great.
So my name is Andrew Hall. I'm another lead program manager on the team. My team does .NET tools and the Azure tools that Paul doesn't do.
Hey Tim, I'm Ballin Subramanian. I lead the product team that's responsible for building all the tooling and services and developer services for Azure. So in addition to all the Visual Studio tooling, we also build tooling for all kinds of developers, Java, Node developers, and also services like DevTest Labs, Redis, and Container Registry, and so on.
So what I just heard is tools, tools, tools.
Yep.
So it's we're a tools company.
We're tools.
We like helping developers be productive on cloud development. That's what I hear.
That is
Right on.
Accurate?
Yeah, very
All right.
We're a developer experience company, so we build tools and services and all the good stuff for developers everywhere. Yep.
That's awesome.
Yes.
And so what are, so we're here at Build. We've seen a lot of exciting things for not only Azure developers, but new improvements in Visual Studio as well. What are some of the things that are exciting to you guys about your particular spaces here, and maybe any particular things you might want to show us and get us excited about?
Yeah, I guess I can start. So my team does a lot of the Azure App Service tools. And so I think
What is App Service? Let's take a step back, make sure everyone knows what that is.
Yeah, that's a great question. So App Service, short for application service, and we think of, at least from the tools perspective, it's the easiest place to get started in Azure. It's kind of 1 to 2 minutes from having a web or API application on your machine to being able to test and run that in the cloud. Smaller number of resources dedicated to it, spins up really quick, and it kind of just works. If you can F5 it on your local machine, it's going to just work up an app service.
Awesome.
And so, yeah, that tends to be if you're thinking about getting started with the cloud, or hey, I just want to try this Azure thing out, that's where we recommend that you start.
It's fully managed, right?
Yeah, fully
I was
managed.
about to say, not a VM, at least from my perspective, as the consumer of it, it's not a VM, fully managed service. Don't have to worry about patching, all that stuff.
No patching. We handle the scale up, scale down. So
I just worry about my code,
yep.
get it to the cloud.
Bring your app, we do the rest.
Awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, and so one of the other things that runs top of it that I'm quite excited that we released tools for less than a year ago, and we've just been continuing to improve them over time, is serverless computing. It's called Azure Functions.
Azure Function.
Azure List Function.
That'd be even more awesome.
Yeah, no, so Azure
Announcing
Function,
today.
serverless
That sounds expensive.
computing. And so the idea is it's entirely event-driven, and you only pay for while your code's actually executing. And so that's on the newer side, and I think it's one of the things that's most exciting because of what it empowers you to do from both a cost and scalability perspective. Paul mentioned like a normal app service plan would scale, there's a slider, really easy to scale up and down. You just say, I want this many instances, and boom, it runs that many instances. But now you're paying for that number of instances. Where with serverless computing, you just give it your code, and then the service decides based on your load how many instances to spin up, automatically spins them back down. And I mentioned the only paying basically while your exact lines of code that you've written are running. So a number of milliseconds it runs for.
And I think the key part there is the event-driven programming model, right? So you can write your code to react to different events that happen on the platform or different parts of your application. So your code is actually running only when those events are happening, and you're actually doing something to react to those events.
Yeah, exactly. So when you talk about show, maybe we could jump in.
Yeah,
and
let's
do a quick
take
demo
a quick look
of what that looks like. So what I have here is I have a basic front-end web application.
We're looking at the demo machine.
Yep. Front-end web application with an Azure Function project. Is it?
Try the Windows P. Yeah. There we go.
There we go.
Minute to learn, lifetime to master. Yep.
I would have assumed the person would have had it set up.
I'm talking about myself.
Okay. All right.
So we're here in Visual Studio 2017.
Yep.
Okay.
Here in Visual Studio 2017, so I have Azure Function project, and what this is going to do is this is going to simply...
You said you have an Azure Function project. How do we get there?
Great question. So I'm going to do File, New Project, New Project. I go to my Cloud node down here under Visual C#, and Azure Functions is project type.
Great. So a set of templates that are built in to get us kind of bootstrapped.
Exactly.
A little bit.
So I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of this because I already have
So
it
you
set
started
up.
from that point. I assume the next option, ask me a couple questions, but that's where your starting point was. Got it.
Exactly. And so then what I have the option is, we'll show here, we mentioned it was event driven. So if I say new Azure function, and this will bring up a list of all of the trigger types that are available to me. And so
this is how you guys were talking about serverless being more an event-driven model. So what we're seeing there is, well, what kind of events do you care about, right? If I'm a web API, I'd probably get, put, post kind of type things.
HTTP trigger, which is right in there. Yep.
HTTP-based events, or
another good example is a new record got added to the database, and you want to process it, right? So that's another good example. Yeah. And
so I don't necessarily now have to develop my own queuing technology. I actually can leverage serverless computing and saying, hey, you've got this thing, be aware, monitor this aspect for me and let me know when something happens, whether it's database or you're probably going to show me a different other one.
Definitely. And these are really good for jobs too. So any just piece of work you want to do, almost like we used to call them workers back in the day. So this is a good alternative to workers.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah, so this is Azure Functions V2, which is based on .NET Core project that I have up here. And so these are the built-in templates that you can add additional NuGet packages and additional triggers. You mentioned database, for example. There's not a built-in one to Visual Studio, for example, for a Cosmos or SQL trigger, but all I have to do is add a NuGet package to my project, and then I can configure it to trigger off of every time a new record gets pushed into a database, for example, my function could pick up and run as well. So the list of what I have here is not the complete list of things that I can do. It's just the ones that we pre-scaffold the code for you when you select it and go.
I'm really excited about the event grid trigger too. I mean, we've been talking about event grid a lot at Build. It's a great mechanism for you to subscribe to events, both platform events and also events that your own code generates. And it's great that now we have the functions integration, so now you can process those events in serverless code.
Awesome. So what are the tools doing for us in this experience?
Yeah, so let's just drop in. You mentioned queue, so we'll do a simple queue because it's easy to work with on my local machine. There's a Azure Web Job Storage is a connection string in my settings file, and we're going to say that we're going to listen to events that come in on this concept, a queue named myQueue-items. So I'll click OK, and it's going to add a new function to my project. And so what I can see here is this. In terms of what the tools did for me is they created a function on my behalf that is going to, tells me it's a queue trigger. It's going to listen to my queue items, and then the connection string to the queue is stored in this Azure Web Job Storage, which is over here in this local.settings.json file, which in my case, I'm just going to work on my local machine with the Azure Storage Emulator.
Okay.
So let's make sure that's up and running. This tool.
So you're emulating an Azure Storage account.
Correct.
Locally.
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay.
So.
And now this tool that just launched, what was that?
That was Storage Explorer, and I'll use that in a minute to
we'll
pop
talk
into
back
this.
at that. Another tool that helps us.
Yep.
Okay.
So
emulator.
Anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to listen to events that pop into here. Emulator will start when I start debugging it.
Cool.
So let's go ahead and just start debug. Let's say start new instance. And so one of the really cool things about Azure Functions, if you look across the sort of competitive landscape of various cloud offerings, is Azure Functions are the only ones that bring a first-class local development experience on my behalf. So that was a previous event I had wired up on my storage emulator. So let's go back to my function 1 CS over here. And so we have full local F5 debugging from Visual Studio, and VS Code also has an extension that Balin's team builds that lets you work with node functions and other language types as well.
And if you are a Visual Studio developer, this is not a new thing, right? I just saw you just set a breakpoint using your keyboard shortcut. It's the same thing.
It's the same thing.
Same thing.
Yeah,
exactly.
that's a key principle we have. Even as you start doing functions, serverless, or Kubernetes, right? We want to make sure developers have a very familiar experience. But at the same time, we want to kind of evolve the kinds of applications and the kinds of platforms that they're targeting as well.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, so I have a queue here. This just lets me push messages into it and then process them. So I'm going to say add message. And so you could imagine a website or some other tool, an IoT device, pushing information, whether it's Service Bus or just a simple storage queue. And so let's say, hello, Tim. Let me click OK. Push that in. And then I realize that there's a thing that configuration file I forgot to set here as I was setting this up that will tell me how frequently to check the queue for events coming into that. So I just want to add that. So we have great IntelliSense support for that as well. So let's go down to queues, and I want to say max polling interval, and this is in milliseconds, so let's just say we want to make sure to dequeue items at least once every 500 milliseconds.
Okay.
So let me go ahead and bring this back to here. So let's say debug, start new instance.
And the local support's pretty new, right? Like,
yeah, we first shipped it last August. So yeah, it's been out for less than a year, and we've been working for. We have Paul has some stuff. This is just underlying runtime stuff that it was popping up there in the breakpoint thing. But now you can see that my
So now we're in
function
the
has been
breakpoint.
triggered. Yep. And we hit the breakpoint, and so you can see that the message that I typed, "Hello Tim," that I put into the queue, was passed into my function. I could do something and process that here if I wanted. I hit F5, I continue, and then now if we go back to our queue over here and we refresh it, we're going to see that it's been dequeued and it's been pulled out of the queue by my function.
Awesome. And so, we're developing locally a serverless function that the next step now we're going to push to the cloud. And but this environment gives me familiar tools that I'm used to, the familiar productivity that I'm used to, without having to download any set of new tools or anything like that, or figure out some kind of remote debug situation or anything like that.
Yep.
right.
That's correct. And so then what we do is once we're ready to go is we could just right-click on, you mentioned getting it to Azure. If I wanted to test this in Azure, probably eventually I'd want to set up a continuous integration pipeline or something like that, but I probably want to test it. I don't necessarily want to go just from my local machine straight to a CI/CD pipeline and hope that everything's going to work. So I right-clicked on the project, I said publish, and now Visual Studio gives me a ability to get that up into Azure, and it would take about a minute to create the resources in Azure and then spin it up. So if I click this, you'll see the options that I have to fill out as soon as I have my Azure account.
And so this is an in-VS experience that's allowing me basically to do the same thing that if I would have done in the portal and kind of configure those type of things.
Correct.
And not having me to leave my environment and just kind of continue to be productive there.
Yep.
That's correct.
It's almost like
Awesome.
first you F5 on your local machine, now we're going to F5 it in Azure.
Right. Right.
Just using publish.
That's awesome.
And Ballin can talk about even cooler things we have coming. Like
Yes.
That, so.
Yeah, I thought, I saw so Hanselman showed some exciting things around containers.
including his ability to balance a mic.
Yes, his ability to armpit a mic a little bit and everything. That was good. Maybe I should rip mine off and see if you'll do that for me, Bob. But there was dev spaces.
Yeah.
Is that, how does that work into this flow? Is that helpful?
Yeah. Yeah, we're very excited about dev spaces because we think, again, it's one of the differentiating things that we have for our Kubernetes service on Azure. And our goal is to expand it to multiple runtime platforms on Azure as well. So dev spaces itself is kind of a feature that you enable on different platform services. But then there's really good Visual Studio integration as well. And just stepping back a little bit, our goal really, like I said before, was to enable developers who are doing different languages, different frameworks, but also different levels of DevOps, right? They might be doing a direct publish, or they might be setting up a CI/CD pipeline. But when it comes to Kubernetes and microservices development, we think there's an even better way. Like one of the biggest challenges with microservices and Kubernetes development is you're often not just working with your code. You're working with hundreds or tens and hundreds of services that the rest of your team has built. So rather than try to reproduce all of those services running in Kubernetes in the cloud on your local machine, which would mean that you need a really powerful laptop. What we said was, let's take the development experience to the cloud, but still give you the familiar experience of doing things from Visual Studio. So what the Visual Studio integration with Dev Spaces does is it lets you work on your code, just like what Andrew was showing with functions, deploy it into a Kubernetes cluster so that you don't have to reproduce everything else that's running in that cluster locally, but then have the same breakpoints and debugging experience that you would get locally while working with Kubernetes in the cloud.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, we're really excited to try that out. It seemed efficient and pretty good for working in group environments. Large, again, bringing that cloud development brings a lot of different nuances to our developers. So bringing that
Definitely, especially you get into microservice development. We talk about the 2 pizza teams, right? So you want these teams to be productive on their own, but still play in a bigger application.
Right.
So
right.
Yep.
So you mentioned you guys also work on like some diagnostic things. What is interesting in that space?
Yeah, we did a
how can we get developers excited about diagnostics?
How can we? Let's see if I can do it. So a few things. First thing, when I think about application diagnostics, I think about application insights. So that's our built-in APM, application performance monitoring solution in Azure. So you can feel free to bring any solution that makes you happy, or if you'd like to, you can try the one that we have built in. That's App Insights. So we made it really easy, actually, this week to turn it on, easier than ever. So let me give you a quick peek at that. So we'll switch over to the demo machine.
So what we're looking at here now is the Azure portal.
We're looking at the Azure portal.
Okay.
So let's stick with web apps for now. And
Now, while you're configuring that, is App Insights also is this what you're showing? Is this the same product that App Center integrates into solutions as well?
you want to talk
Yes,
about that? Yeah.
it is. App Insights is our monitoring solution, the first-party monitoring solution that's part of the platform. So all these other tools and services that you see, they integrate with App Insights natively.
Okay, great.
One of the other things we've done is with Kubernetes, with the AKS solution, we've integrated App Insights as well. So many of the monitoring information that you can get, both about your cluster and about your application, is now available in the AKS blades itself in the portal, but all of that is backed by Azure Monitor and App Insights.
Okay, awesome, perfect.
Okay. Now it's time for a good question because I'm still provisioning. Let me tell you about this. Okay, so we can just go to the resource. So I just want to show you.
So what did you provision? You just
So I just created
this is a web server.
This is a web app, and I want to show you.
Yeah.
I could have turned on App Insights from the get-go, but we see a lot of people have existing apps. I just want to show you can take any app.
That was kind of my
Got it.
cue to be, right? Like
Yeah.
typical developers, like I'm just gonna write code, screw tests. I don't care about diagnostic and stuff until somebody's like,
Exactly.
hey, how's
care
everything
about it,
going
yeah.
on in the
Yeah,
app?
that's. I'll get to that later. Oh no!
Yeah, how do I do that?
I'm on the floor. Yeah, so now we worked with all the service teams, like Balin was saying. This is an example of how the app service team has made, App Insights front and center. So I can just click that. And in a case where I don't have App Insights enabled, the UI will kind of detect that, and it'll give me an easy experience to just go ahead and turn it on. And let's see if we have. Just because I wanted to keep it really exciting, I'm demoing out of our Canary environment.
Yeah, I was gonna
Why
say.
not? Why not do a live demo?
The orange bar is not
that's-
something that every customer sees.
No, it's just for me.
Yeah.
Paul didn't find the conference network scary enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely being a demo maverick now. Let's give it.
So as we're waiting for that to come up, what is going to show there? Is it actually pre-provisioning based on what I have, or?
Yeah, so what we'll basically do is we're going to dynamically add App Insights to your application, and the way that you dynamically add something to a web application is through an extension. So think about App Service. App Service is in an application PaaS. It's a fully managed environment. It's actually in a sandbox. So App Service actually doesn't want you to go customize the operating system, right? Because it needs to be secure, stable, kind of consistent for everybody. But there are these formal extensions, and those can inject well-known things. And so in this case, we'll inject application insights.
And when I do that, so now you're doing it through the portal experience. Now let's say that I have my local dev experience and things like that. Is that now reflecting a config that I have in my project?
That's a great question. So think about maybe two cases. One where you're having a problem, you want to add it quickly. We may probably use the portal. But once you decide this is a dependency you want to add, we would always recommend just kind of a config as code approach. Just go back to your solution, and you can configure a connected service with application insights. So I kind of go like this, and we're in functions. Let's go to the web app. That's the example I want to do. And we can add App Insights telemetry. And this will walk me through and guide me to adding the SDK, adding the right configuration, and it'll be integrated from the get-go in my project.
Okay.
But we still understand multiple environments. So there's this thing called an I key or an instrumentation key. Think of that as your connection string. You'll want to change that from environment to environment. So we just persist that as an environment variable. And you want to, after publish or when you move to another environment, you'll just want to change that. So that
you can have like a staging environment.
All these different environments. It's the exact same bits. You're just pointing to almost a different database where your telemetry will go.
Okay.
And as part of the configuration, if there are any secrets, we also store them in key vault so that your secrets are unexposed. iKey isn't a secret, but if you had other secrets to access databases and such.
And these are saved similarly how, I like how you said, think of it as a connection string. So if I have SQL connection strings, I usually save them in host settings files and stuff like that. Same type of thing, right?
Yeah.
Environment variables. So you
Yeah, environment variables. So we set up a key, and the config system that Andrew's team work on can look at any number of places. It can look in app settings. It could look in user secrets, which I pulled up right here. Now I'm going to have to remember to rotate the keys. And then also environment variables, which is really a best practice. So you'd go to the app settings in the portal, or you could use the command line. You can always override the app settings.
Okay.
That's just a good pattern for SaaS.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So we've got about 1 minute left.
Okay.
As we think about developers, we also, so.
Well, can I sneak in one thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I didn't get to show the last thing, but we're also really excited that so this experience will turn on the snapshot debugger, which makes it easy in production to debug things without breaking the application, like literally breaking it and stopping it. Another thing that we did is we added this on-demand profiler. So when you're doing, let's say, a load test, or you're seeing an issue performance-wise, you can on-demand go fetch a bunch of deep profiler traces and find the root cause of your perf issue.
Yeah, and the really cool thing about that is all of that is available in the Visual Studio tool itself, right?
Awesome.
So you can do it in the portal, but you can also do it in the tool in the context of your code.
Where's the best place to learn about all this stuff?
The best place is actually in docs.microsoft.com Azure, and we have a .NET area, and that's the best place for the .NET.
And similarly, some of the triggers and serverless functions and stuff, we have good samples there that get people started, and want people to give us feedback on how those are going. Likewise, Ball and I work together on a lot of SDK evaluation things and stuff, and it's not just about .NET developers, of course. We provide SDKs for a lot of things that we're talking about for Java developers, Python developers, JavaScript developers. Yeah, exactly.
Got them all.
Yeah.
And about DevSpaces is currently in private preview, but it's open for you to sign up. And you would go to aka.ms/devspaces, and there's a very simple form, and we get you in.
Awesome. Yeah, lots of great things for developers who use Visual Studio Code. We saw the Live Share and the IntelliCode and all this great stuff. And so now additional productivity tools for cloud developers. Really excited about it. So thanks for joining me, guys. Really appreciate it. And so make sure to go to the docs site, aka.ms/devspaces. Sign up for free Azure account, go in the portal, learn about App Insights and all that good stuff, right?
Yep, and go get the new version of Visual Studio and click that Azure workload.
Click Azure Workload when you install the new version of Visual Studio.
Yep.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you for joining us here at Build on Channel 9 Live.
Thanks.
And more information and more exciting things to come here at Build. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.